had to choose an overall favorite currently, it's a spot in San Bruno called Masra. And yeah, I went in there, and then one day the guy thought that he knew me. He's like, "What's up, man? Like, it's good to see you again." And I was like, "I don't think we've met before."
Yeah.
And he's like, but then we ended up getting pretty tight. We've hung out a number of times, and now
wow.
dude always lets me eat free.
That's
so
yeah.
And it's like it's a crazy spot. Like they're actually on the top 100 list in like the U.S. for food, and I had no idea when I first went there. But
that's actually
it's
fire. What type of
really
food is
cool spot. It's a Mediterranean food.
Okay.
And so it's kind of like a fusion of different types of things and stuff,
sick.
and really cool spot. If I can ever take you guys there, I'd love to.
Welcome back to a Light in the Dark podcast. My name is Matt.
And I'm Keegan.
And we are very excited. We have a very special guest. His name is Luke. And we met Luke at the church we go to, Reality. And Luke is on the prayer team, and he actually prayed for Keegan. So I think I'll let Keegan explain.
Yeah. So should we let Luke tell about himself?
Sure.
Yeah.
Whatever you.
Yeah. So my name's Luke. I grew up in the Bay Area and lived here most of my life. I went to school in San Luis Obispo at Cal Poly for 4 years. So other than that, pretty much always been around here. And I recently got married about 6 months ago. And
Let's go.
To a lovely lady named Shauna. She's one of the coolest people I've ever met.
Let's go.
I'm living out in Burlingame right now, and it's been fun. Yeah, I've been at Reality for about, officially about a year and a half, but I first went there right before I left for college, and that was when God first started doing a lot in my life, and so I love that church, so I've kind of been around it for a while, and so it was really cool to get to meet these guys there. So, yeah.
That's so sweet. And also, I know we've said it off camera, but huge congrats on the marriage.
Yes.
So amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah. And so like Matt mentioned, we, when we first got out here, how we met Luke was we were going to Reality, and it was a really nice church that we got recommended. But when we first arrived there, it was it felt like we were two small rocks in a huge ocean. And every time we went, it was we couldn't find community, and it was we walked in the doors and we walked out the doors, never saying a word to anyone. And coming from our church back home, it was a pretty tough experience because it was more intimate, and we were able to build stronger connections. And so we literally decided that one Sunday was going to be the last Sunday that we attend that church. And something in my spirit near the end of the service was yo, you need to go up and ask for prayer. And I literally looked around, and there was a couple of people in that corner, but my eyes specifically went to you, and I was yo, all right. And so I had never really gone up and asked for prayer like that. And so I just sent it, and you prayed a prayer for community for us, and from that prayer birthed 40 to 50 new friends in the span of a week. And so I know we've already told you this, but it's just that was one of the biggest blessings, and it saved us from changing churches, and who knows how our journey would have gone. And we also met Ethan through it, and it's just crazy. And so we're very, very blessed to have you on this pod, and we're super excited for you to share your testimony.
That's crazy that prayer had the impact. I do remember when you came up, and I was I was just really excited because I could tell that you were just so for the Lord, and you just really wanted to see Him, and it was just really, really cool prayer. And a cool prayer request, I guess, that you're coming up. I felt the desire in your heart for that. I was man, this is so encouraging to see somebody wanting that. So and then just prayed, and God did so much that I was pretty crazy, pretty humbled by that. So
it was crazy because it really wasn't instantaneous like response from God, because we ended up like talking with Luke for like a little bit after the service, and someone came up to us and literally like invited us all to like a field day, like and we met so many people there, so many people that we still spend time with. So
and the crazy thing is I'd never been invited to something like that before. Like, no one had ever like walked up to me and been like, hey, we're gonna have an event afterwards, you should come, like like in that type of environment too, because like, you know, I'd obviously been invited to like events that were at the church or something, but like to go and get asked out to like a group of young people all hanging out that are all trying to get to know each other more, I was like, that's pretty wild. So yeah, man, that's a fun story.
Crazy how God can work.
Seriously.
Before we get into your testimony, I did want to ask, like, have you been like the people you pray for being on the prayer, like, because you're on the prayer team, do you like stay close with any of those people? Like, how, like, what is that like?
Yeah, it depends, I think, on the given situation. There was this one guy named Keegan who I saved for but yeah, I think it's been situation to situation. There's definitely been a couple people that I prayed for that it's kind of become like a thing where they would come back again and we pray together, and I got to kind of know them through that. But other times people kind of just need to come up and just kind of have a moment with the Lord, and I'm kind of actually kind of just trying to stay out of the way in a sense and just kind of like let them have a moment with God and just kind of like having their eyes on God while I'm kind of just there to pray alongside them. And so yeah, so there's a couple people that I got to know more through that, but then also some people that I don't really know their name. So yeah,
that's beautiful. I've never really. That's a great explanation. That's really cool.
Yeah, thanks for the
that's how you do it.
Yeah, I think like I have so many questions, but I want to get on track. But
of course,
what is the beginning of your testimony? What happened?
Yeah, for sure. I think to set the stage of the long ride of my testimony, I think I'll probably just kind of give a little bit of context for like what I grew up in, where I was from and everything. Like I mentioned, it's from the Bay Area, and I grew up with 2 older brothers. I was the youngest of 3, and parents were together and very blessed by that. My parents, they grew up in the Bay Area as well, so we've always been local to this area and pretty big families on both sides and everything. And so I grew up in a Christian house. They were all my parents both grew up Catholic, but then met Jesus radically in the church and got brought to God through that, which is really cool. There's some incredible stories there I wish we had time for, but my parents saw God move in some pretty wild ways.
That's so awesome.
But yeah, and I grew up in that situation of going to church, and I went to a Christian school for most of my life, and all the way through the end of high school actually. And so I was always around it, but I never really understood it. I think like I don't knock my parents for this. They didn't grow up as Christians, right? And so I don't think they really had that journey of figuring out what it looked like to actually be like, 8 years old and a Christian, 8 years old and trying to become that. I think in a lot of ways the Catholic Church kind of assumes that you are, and so there wasn't much guidance as much in like the conversation more deeply about what that meant for me. And so it's kind of a little bit trying to figure that out more solo, and it was definitely a little bit confusing. But yeah, so as I went along, I was going to that Christian school, as I mentioned, kind of was like getting my worldview very shaped by Christianity, but not really knowing what it was to have a relationship with Jesus. And I would say, know what it was to have a relationship with Jesus until I was probably at the end of high school. And so it took me a long while to get there. And not for sake of not for not wanting it, just not really understanding it, having that wisdom around it. And so going to that school, it was very helpful in some ways, getting to see just like how Jesus is woven into the world and all that type of stuff. But I feel like a lot of the people there weren't necessarily walking with God. They didn't actually I wouldn't say many people actually had any sort of spiritual desire for God.
Wow.
But I got to my 8th grade year, and this was kind of like a funny turn where I had an opportunity to leave that school and go to some other schools in the area that were more so for sports, right? Like I could have gone and played sports somewhere, and I was very much considering that, and I wanted to play baseball, and I thought I could be pretty good at it. But it's so weird to think back on this as like an 8th grader, but I was like, I was really terrified of hell. Like, I would actually get hit by this pretty regularly. Like, when I was like growing up, I would always have these stressful nights of laying in bed and being like, okay, I know that there's a God, but I've never experienced him, and I've never really like engaged with him, right? And I was like, I don't really know what it's like to have a conversation with this person, to have a relationship with him, how. And so I was just in the spot of like, oh, what if God comes back now and I don't know him, and then it's just like, what if like I'm in this dark room and then I never get out or something like that. I was like, it would just spook me a lot, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
And so I think like as an 8th grader, I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna stay. I was like, yeah, that sounds better. I think.
Yeah. I don't want to go to.
So
I
yeah,
can't play
was
baseball.
Like,
don't want to go to hell.
Exactly. And I was just nervous about like, oh, if I leave, like, what if I lose my opportunity to know God?
Yeah.
And so I ended up staying at that school through most of high school. It was cool. We would have chapels and things like that on Fridays, and it was,
for our audience, what is chapel?
Yeah, so chapel was essentially like kind of like a small church service in essence. Like we'd bring in a speaker, or one of the teachers would speak. A lot of the teachers I think most of the teachers at that school were Christians and stuff like that. And so they would have like a message and some worship and like some response time, so where you could pray and receive prayer and things like that, which was really cool. And I remember in those days I had a lot of longing to know God, but it was always very interesting because in those chapels I'd be hands raised, like, and not many people would do that, so I was like really trying. I was like, I'm gonna do all of the things that seem like what you do to try to get to you, God. And so I was, I would be down on my knees like praying and asking him to reveal himself to me, and I didn't really understand a lot of that. Why, like, I didn't understand why it wasn't happening, and it confused me, but I was really longing for that. But all while, and I look back on this with a lot more clarity, all while I really was not going after it with my life. I don't think I had an understanding of what it was to like try to seek God in a place of like actually saying like, oh, I'm gonna fully seek you, because like at that point of life, like I was like struggling with all the things that guys at that age do, pornography and like going after relationships and all that sort of thing, like with just really trying to make myself like have a good reputation and popularity and all those things that you go through in high school, right? And so I think I was really pursuing all of those things, all while like thinking that I was pursuing God. And so I think that there was kind of a little bit of it was two-sided to definitely to a degree. And so I think I didn't find him. It confused me. I got to my junior year in high school, and I kind of just got frustrated. I was like, God, I don't know if it was a spoken thing or if it just happened, but I was like, God, I'm like down on my knees trying to get to you all the time. I don't understand it. Why am I not having a relationship with you? Why are you not like revealing yourself to me? I was so thrown off by that, and I was frustrated, and I felt really unsatisfied. Because I think it makes sense, right? Like I was living in a very worldly way while trying to also pursue God.
Yeah.
And so it just left me pretty darn unsatisfied. And so I just kind of made a decision at that point where I was like, hey, I don't want to just be empty all the time, so I'm going to go and just try out the things that seem more fun. So I was like, I'm going to try to, talk to more girls in like a more carefree way. I'm going to try to just like hang out with my friends. And I went to a Christian school, so you couldn't get into much, but like, like I had like a couple times of like drinking with my friends and stuff like that, and like, like some relationships I shouldn't have been in and things like that. And ultimately it really wrecked me, because I think at that point, I was just like throwing myself pretty hard into that type of stuff, trying to find satisfaction. And I think what I found that was really compelling, and I'm very thankful to have found it so quickly. I think this was God's grace to show me, but I just remember one instance where I just went really deep with this type of stuff, and I just walked away from it feeling so empty. And I was like, these are the very things that are supposed to satisfy me. Like in my worldview currently, this is what makes me whole. And I was like, and I feel so empty, and I feel horrible, and I had to hurt people to get to where I was going. Like, I think it was like the two things that I saw were like, what I thought was going to make me full was actually draining me and emptying me, and like just filling me with shame. And to do that, I was lying, I was like hurting people. I was like, I realized like I had to literally put people at my like at expense for my own benefit. So it was just like all this backward stuff where it was just, it felt so hard, and I didn't like who I was at that point. I was had a lot of shame in who I was and how I was living. And so I remember just like sitting in my car that night, and I just was sitting there, and I was like, God, there like has to be more. And I think that was like somewhere towards like halfway through my senior year in high school. It was just like, there has to be more, God. Like, I just feel like this can't be it, because I just feel so empty. It was really weird, because it was like I was going deeper and deeper into sin, but then at that moment, God actually like came really near and gave me this picture of like light, which doesn't really make sense, but I feel like it was just like totally His grace on me to just be like, there is hope, like try this again, you know? And so I was like, wow, okay, like I'm gonna give that a go. And I went to I mean, for people who are out in California, they would probably know this place, but a lot of other people maybe not. There's a camp, like a Christian camp called Hume Lake. And it's like, I feel like the cool Christian camp out in California.
Okay.
But I got invited there with my friend's church, and we went out there, and I remember we had been before, but this was the year that I feel like was actually more impactful in my life. My youth pastor basically talked to me, and he was like, hey man, I know that you guys normally just try to get girls' numbers when you guys are here.
Wow. Okay.
What if like he's like, that kind of burned you last year? Because it did. I got pretty hurt by one of the girls. And then he was like, what if this year you just like actually just try to like encounter God and see what that's like, and like hang out, and I'm here to process it with you. And then I just remember through worship and through some of the teaching, I felt like this glimpse of like, is something happening in me? Like it was weird. Like I felt like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like there's something here. And I don't think there was ever a moment where like I shifted towards like, now I am walking with God, but I feel like it was like just this, I came in that day, maybe in around that time, and then things just kind of progressed. And like I look back 6 months later, and I was like, oh wait, I'm like following God. And that was like a very big moment in there where I just remember like, whoa, like something is happening with like just like the atmosphere here in worship, and like and like I felt like there was just a hope here, and like I don't know have a great way to describe it, but I just remember like worshiping more passionately than I ever had, and like feeling more hope in it. So I was like, wow, okay, I'm gonna lean in more. So
that's sweet.
That was pretty impactful. And then where to go from there? There was also this really cool thing that happened in, I guess this is a little bit back to like the beginning of my senior year, but I had run for like student body, like president or something like that. And I thought I was going to win too. And the person who introduced me to my wife actually beat me up. So she got me. But, and it was really funny because at that point, I think I had a good rep around my school, and I think, but I definitely didn't deserve it, because I think there was a lot of stuff going on behind closed doors that I just like wasn't necessarily the person of honor that I think a lot of people thought that I was. So my principal, an awesome guy, his name's Dan Robinson. He actually recently passed away, but just God needs this dude so much. He after I like lost that presidential whatever you want to call it, he he just kind of called me into his office and he was like, hey, I wanted to chat with you and I've been thinking recently. And he was like, I'm wondering, why did you not win this? Like, what is God doing with that? And he was like, I think maybe what God actually has for you is, instead of your time going towards that, maybe he wants you to actually lead the guys' Bible study for the school. And and it was really funny because I definitely wasn't a Christian at this point. And I had been a part of this Bible study the last couple of years, and it was always pretty poorly run, and I didn't feel like it was very effective for me, at least. And I looked back and I was like, wait, he's talking about a survey right now. So we took a survey, and in that survey they asked, like, do you want to be a part of a guys' Bible study? And then, like, all these different questions, like, do you want to be one that's like led by a teacher, led by a student? Would you want to lead? Well, like, all these different questions. I said no, all of them. And he was, and in this like conversation, he says, I saw you like marked yes on all of those answers, and I was like, wait a second, like, I knew for sure that I marked yes, because I think I literally left that, like, the survey when I was talking to my buddies, and I was like, yeah, no, I put no on all that stuff, right? Wow. And then I was like sitting there talking to him, and I was like, I'm not gonna tell him I said no. That'd be really weird now, right? And I was like, I'll consider it. I'll think about it. And so I went home and I talked to my dad about it a little bit, and he was like, hey, like, maybe this is something to consider. Maybe this is like a good thing for you. And and he's like, I don't know, this might be God working, you know. And I didn't tell my dad to put no. That doesn't But I decided to go and just do it. I was like, all right, I'm just gonna give this a try. And I remember that year, like, just, I think being in that spot of like leading the group kind of actually really drew me into just like having to study the Bible a little more, having to like look at God and like seeing the worth of it. And I just remember like wanting things to change. Like, I wanted to be more like Christ and in that setting. And I just remember like the guys being all together, we would, you know, kind of talk about purity and things like that, and wanting to be free from just like different things, and just wanting to get rid of shame in our life and stuff. And I just remember like that year, like actually seeing like freedom from that for the first time ever. Because we'd all tried to kick that stuff like so many times with like pornography and stuff like that, and it had just never worked. And all of a sudden, like, we were doing it in Jesus' name, and like we were actually finding some legit freedom, like still struggling, but like far less, and actually like finding some separation from it. So which is like really cool. So that was like just one of those years where I look back and I was like, wow, like God really changed my life through that year, and just like really drew me through some circumstances that I did not expect him to get me through. So yeah, and from there was another pretty formative thing where I had a relationship with somebody who, it started out good and then went bad for, it was about like a year or so, and I think that was a very also interesting thing. I learned a lot about how to follow God from this person as a pastor's kid, and like learned a lot about prayer and what like seeking the Lord actually looked like. And then from there, like, I graduated, went off to college, and like that relationship quickly became sour. I wasn't in the maturity to actually be like doing a Christian relationship well at that point. So I think a lot of my desire for the world kind of was still winning out, even though I was knowing Jesus at that point. And so this is where I think like things started to get a lot deeper in my faith. Was I went to Cal Poly, and I'd always lived around the Bay Area, and had always been in a very, very tight community. I went to the same school for my whole life, and so I'd never really seen any big change before. And when I went off to school, it rocked me, like absolutely rocked me. I felt like I lost everything that had been a part of me. I felt like I was completely stripped of everything. Like, I remember when my parents first left, I like had like my first panic attack. Like, I had never really experienced anything like that, and I just felt so afraid consistently of just not having my friends there, not having my family there. Like, all these different things were completely just stripped away from me, and all the things that I put my identity in, and I was like just messed up by that. And the one thing that I had in that season was like that relationship. And I remember just like needing that relationship to work, but just like it not being in a good place. Very clearly hearing God to call us both out of it, telling us like, hey, you need to lay this down. But I was like, there's no way. I lost everything else. Like I lost like, you know, family, friends, like all of the area that I was familiar with, like sports that I was good at. I was like, academics are way harder. I have nothing. Like I need this. Like that was like the one thing I had. And it was just like really, really hard. I think at that point I started to realize I had put most of my worth in like girls' opinions of me, and it wrecked me because I had been dumped so many times throughout high school, and I was like, I can't lose this because if I lose this, like I have no worth. Essentially, was like my view of myself at that point. And eventually, it just got real bad, and God pulled that relationship out of my life. She actually like broke up with me, and it was like pretty devastating. And I remember just feeling so much fear, and this was about, I think, Thanksgiving break of my freshman year of college, and yeah, it was a crazy thing, because I remember on the way out, I got some advice actually from one of her parents where they said, hey, I know that you've been talking about wanting to see God change your life a lot and not knowing where to go with that, and their advice was you should try to find like a Christian mentor or discipler and try to find like a church that you can be consistently a part of. And I was like, man, I've been looking for a church and I've never had a discipler or anything like that. I don't even know where to get something like that.
Yeah.
And I remember just praying for it, and I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna pray about this, and pray with my dad, and he was like, yeah, like we're good to go. And I was like, I have no idea how it's gonna happen though. And then wild enough, 2 weeks later, I get invited to a church, and I'd been checking out churches, but I just hadn't really connected with any of them. I got invited to this church, and I go in, and in worship, I just felt God's presence in a way I'd never felt God's presence. And I was like, come on, whoa. And I was like, okay, this feels like the place I should be. And so I just kind of made a decision I was going to stay there. And then right after that, one of the pastors like came over to like, and he like invited me out to lunch, which was like super sweet of him. And I proceeded to go out to lunch with the guy and basically spilled my guts of like, so this and this and this and this are all wrong with me, and I need God to change me in this way and this way and this way. And then I was like, so that I can get my girlfriend back. Like, and like I don't think that was actually like my thought, but it was like that was like a big thing. I knew that my life needed to change with that thing. And he basically pointed me in a direction. He's like, hey, there's this guy who leads a small group in our church. His name's Eugene, and incredible guy, and you should go and just like join a small group and get to know him. And it was crazy because God answered that prayer so quick. I stayed at that church like all my years at Cal Poly, and my life changed at that church significantly. And Eugene actually is somebody that I still talk to this day. That's been like amazing. Just somebody who's helped me walk through so much, like just, you know, forming my life more to be like Jesus and drawing in closer with him. And so that was just like a massive answer to prayer where I was like, wow, God, like you really answered that. Like, so I was so blown away by that, and I did not expect it. And it was a crazy thing because that year, I feel like what just really started to happen was when I lost that relationship, I really was like, you know, the house was kind of cleared. Like I didn't have much, and I think where I went, and this was where I think things really started to go deeper with God, and I went to a place where I was like, okay, I have nothing right now, and I'm so unsatisfied. And I saw so clearly, I was like, everything that I've put my worth in, and everything that I have found satisfaction in my life, like my entire life thus far, literally is gone. And I was just like, life is so fragile and it promises you nothing. And I was like, I was like a kind of a man possessed in this with like this like, I need something that I can actually hold on to. Like I need something in life that doesn't run out, like something that I can have for the rest of my life. And like something that will truly satisfy me and never stop. And I remember just like, I was like, okay, literally the only thing that I've ever heard of that could possibly fill that description is God. And I was like, I don't think I've actually experienced that with God, but I was like, I don't really have another option. I gotta go see if that's who he actually is.
Yeah.
And with that season, I started, attending that church very regularly and just getting involved and going to a small group. Excuse me. All while I was starting this journey of seeking God, like in the quiet place or in the secret place or whatever you want to call it. You could also just call it my dorm room.
Yeah. Nice.
But
the single bed just probably. Yeah, I like it.
Exactly. But a good friend of mine gave me a journal and said, hey, sit down in your room alone and just spend some time reading the Bible. Or I think at that point I was reading like devotional plans and stuff like that. Like read the scripture and just listen to worship music, worship along with it, and pray and talk honestly to God and ask Him to show up in your life. And I started doing that, and I think I was like so desperate for change in my life that I think like I was really, really, really strict about it with myself, where I was like, okay, I cannot miss a day, like type of thing. Yeah. So I think I remember like I had like 70 days straight of just like sitting down and just being in this, and now I'm like, sometimes I'll miss a day, like I'm like, but I think at that point I was really strict on it, and I remember some days were really ordinary, some days I kind of felt like a glimmer of hope, some days I saw like, oh, this seems like something that could be really good. But I remember this one day where I was praying and I was just telling God, I was like, God, I need you to be more real to me than all of the things that have satisfied me in the past, because I genuinely think, God, like the things that filled me in the past like are far more tangible than you, and I don't think that you could be as real as any of those things. I've never seen that. Man. And I don't. Wow. And it's just like, if I'm gonna do this, I need you to like show me that you can actually do that real. And I remember, it's kind of like hard to remember exactly what it felt like, but I just remember experiencing God's presence in such a tangible way where it just like shook my whole body. And I just remember feeling so convinced of His presence in the room, and it made me feel whole. Like I felt so full in that moment. And I remember these words that I wrote on that day like just always stick in my head, and I just remember I didn't know it could be like this, and I just remember like that moment changed me so much, and just having more and more of those moments with God, like I just knew that He loved me in that moment, and I knew that I was His, and that He was actually in my life, and it gave me this sense of like security. Like it made me lean on Him in a way that was just like crazy, and it was a really wild thing, because oh man, like that year was so hard for me. Every time I would go home and I'd have to come back, I would still like struggle with like panic attacks and just like fear and all that struggle and all those types of things. But I feel like God used it so much. I think He knew like if He was going to actually draw me in fully, He kind of had to take everything away so He could actually make me lean on Him fully. And
let's go.
And He did, because I remember it was just such a crazy thing for me. Like I remember like all these different moments where one of them, I remember coming back to San Luis Obispo from home after a visit, and got on the train and started having a panic attack. I was like, just like so afraid of what school was going to be and what feeling alone was going to be like. And then I just remember like I opened up my like journal that I was like praying to God through, and I started writing, and I was like, God, I'm so afraid. I feel so terrified. But I was like, but I'm just going to cling to this, that you are my home. Like where my family is, where I grew up is not my home. You are my home, and you are with me wherever I go. So I'm at home right here, right now. And I remember it was so crazy, because I was writing this, like literally tears like running down my face. And in that moment, God just completely took away the panic attack. Wow. And just filled me with this joy that I couldn't, like I was almost like laughing, smiling in like a second. And I just felt this like so blown away, like He completely changed it, like in a moment of like deep anxiety, just completely gave me joy. And I was so blown away, and I was just like, God, you're so real, you're so close. Like, and I remember texting my family and being like, guys, this God is like not just somebody that like we just like could just talk about, like He's like everything. Oh my gosh, like He's impacting me so deeply. And I just like all these moments, right, where it was so hard, but because of the difficulty, He drew me in so deep. And I think of other things too.
Can I just
Yeah.
gotta interrupt.
Yeah.
This is so good. Like I can't stress like how impactful this is, and it's so beautiful to hear. I have 2 points. First, just like we haven't really talked about this much, but just I think there's so much beauty in the fact that you grew up in the church and you experienced church, you experienced Christianity, you experienced all of these things, and yet you still chose to go into the world to like see what it was like and try these new things. But yet you have this desire to pursue God, right? Like it's so crazy. Like you were in all of this,
Yeah.
and then you decided to pursue the world, and there's nothing in there for you. Like there's nothing, and ultimately God gave you that opportunity to I mean, like how else are you gonna know
Yeah.
unless you experience?
That's
And
so true.
you walk into the world and there's nothing that fills you up like he can. And so it's like I don't think it's a bad thing when people backslide and go into the world. I think it's a challenge, and I think it's really hard, but I think that people desire to experience the world. Even like I don't know, I haven't met a single Christian that's been Christian their whole life. Like I am excited for the day that happens, because I would love to, because that's a great testimony.
Yeah.
But it's beautiful that God allows you to walk in this way so that you can see that he's the only thing that can fill that void. And I think that is such a big testament to free will. Like it's like the importance of like most people will probably experience both, and then they have a choice to make. And yet through his grace, like you're here now, and like it's so beautiful that you just on fire for God, pursuing God like that. And it was like that change was your decision, and like also God's like it's a part of God's plan, but it's also like you had a part to play in that, and being like, you know what, like I'm realizing I've tried all these things, they're not working. And then and it's not like you were like, oh God, like you were like, God, I don't know, but I want to know. And like that heart posture is just so powerful.
Yeah. And like something else that goes along with that too that kind of came to my mind is like just how empty churches without like actually having a relationship with God. And I think like a lot of people have had that experience of like being in the building, knowing the people, listening to the messages, like being a part of the worship, and like I think I just never experienced any real life in it until I met Jesus. Like until he actually came and encountered me, like I didn't have there was nothing worth staying there.
Yeah.
Like
Wow.
Like so I think just the value of like all of that is about knowing Jesus, and until you know Jesus, none of it really makes sense, you know. And so I think that was like just like one of the craziest parts of it all for me was just I think there's like that cheesy phrase that's always thrown around Christianity, but like you're in Christian circles, but I think it's actually really true. Like a moment in God's presence like answers like a lifetime of questions. Like that's how it felt, and kind of just like showed me so much in that. So
I think when you were talking, I was just thinking about like your experience, and I feel like God put a verse on my heart for you, or for that time, for that season when you were like, when all those things were taken out of your life and it was so hard. And it's Mark 8:35. I guess I can start 34. And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, "If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul?" And I just I think that's such a relevant verse for what you were experiencing in that season. Like your whole world is being shattered, really, and
losing it all.
Yeah.
But, to find him, it made it worth it.
Yeah.
I also think it's really cool, like, it seemed like God was really patient with you because like you, Keegan said, and like you said, like you knew of God growing up and like going to church, but church still felt kind of empty because you didn't have that relationship with God.
Yeah.
But it was like God was so patient with you, and once you got to like your most intimate moment with him where you were writing to him, and it was like literally like you were almost writing a letter to God, that's when he was like, all right, now I can 100% reveal myself to him. And it was it's just cool that he was just like waiting for you to get that close.
I know.
It's so beautiful.
And it's crazy because both the things you guys said just actually have a lot of significance in my life currently. Something I used to say a lot was like, God is so patient. Like he waited 17 years of my life to like for me to actually come to him, and like he didn't go away. Like he didn't stop waiting. Like he didn't stop pursuing. It was just crazy, you know.
So awesome.
Yeah, that verse that you were talking about like is so true. And I feel like these days, especially, and we can talk about this later, but like these days, I feel like I'm learning through my marriage, especially, the way that denying yourself and taking up your cross like actually is an action that leads to life, like denying yourself and like going to the place of like killing your you know, like letting yourself die in those ways, like, and how it's so weird but it actually brings life. And I've been experiencing that, so we should definitely like circle back to that too. But that's really cool you guys brought those two things up.
So yeah, you were on the train ride home, you were writing to God, you were texting your family. So
I'm trying to think of some other like just things. Like I think that season was such an interesting season because I think in a lot of ways it was more a season of letting go of things than anything else. I think in a lot of ways, and I think I see now how much over years God starts to mature us, because there's so many things that I would have said I'm more mature in the faith at that point, where I look at it now and I'm like, oh, like, no, I needed so much more maturing to actually really be in a good place with this type of stuff. But there was so many moments that God just freely gave me his presence in at that point. Like another one that comes to mind was I remember, you know, being newer to faith, I had been feeling God's presence a lot. And then I remember I went home for a stretch for a couple weeks, and then I just didn't feel his presence that whole time. And I felt really confused and really discouraged, and I felt really afraid. I was like, wait, did he change his mind about me? Did he leave? Like, and I was like really spooked. And I remember coming back, and then all of a sudden, like I got invited like to this worship night, and I went to this thing, and I didn't really know what to think of it and everything. In the first half of it, I was like wanting to feel God's presence but not feeling God's presence, and then I remember there's just this moment where this guy kind of came up, took a mic, and he was like, I feel like God is wanting to say a few things to the room. He's like, one of the things that he said, a couple things, and he said one of the things that he's saying is, if you feel like I'm far, I'm not, I'm here right now. And I had my hands up at that point, and I remember like that just shook me. Like my hands literally started like running sweat, and then my body got intensely hot, like more than I could have like possibly made happen. And then like my knees started shaking and I just fell. And I was like, oh my gosh. Like I just remember like my friend who invited me, like I turned around and just like hugged him. I was like, thank you for inviting me tonight. Like I was like, God, like God is here. Like, oh my goodness. Like, oh my goodness. And I was so blown away. I hadn't been baptized, and I was like, they were like, did anyone want to be baptized? I was like, I think I'll do it. But I was like, actually, I should probably wait for my family to be here. But like, I was like, just like such a crazy night of like seeing God's presence and being so blown away by that. And there's so many more moments like that through that year. But I think one of the big ones was when he asked me to lay down that relationship in a bigger way, because like I kind of mentioned, when I talked to that pastor, I'd said, hey, I want to see all these different things change in my life. And I think ultimately like it was like in hopes that I could go back to my old life and actually have it. And I think I didn't really realize that, and how much of a lie I was living in. But I remember I went out with with that dude Eugene, and he very awesome guy. He's like probably in his 40s, like has a wife and 3 awesome kids, and he's like a really good dude. Led a small group, and I was so blown away by all he did. But he took me out to lunch and basically just kind of talked to me about like, hey, like how are you doing with that like relationship and letting it go and stuff. And me and that person, we would talk from time to time afterwards, and I was still having just like this hard time with like letting that go, as I mentioned. And I felt like what I was after really was like, okay, I'm gonna go in and seek God, and like hopefully like in like 6 months we're gonna like see if God's changed us enough to like be able to have this relationship. And I remember he just sat with me and he just told me one of the hardest things I'd heard yet in like my faith journey. And what he told me was, Luke, the type of change that you're looking to have in your life is not a change that happens in months, it's a change that happens in years. And he said, I think if you really want to see your life change, if you really want to know God the way you're after, you're gonna have to like let go of this person entirely. And it can't be about getting back with that person. It needs to be about finding God and for him being everything to you. And he just said, like, what would it look like for you to just tell her you can never speak to her again? And I just sat there and I was like, there's no way that I can do that. And then he sat with me for the next 3 hours and we just talked about it. I cried, I like processed it, and I thought about what it would actually look like, and just the power of like just sitting with someone, just helping them process like what it actually looks like to lay it all down for God. Like, I think it's like part of like what counting the cost is, and I think it's actually a really cool thing when I hope to do what he did for me for other people, to actually make that space to actually count the cost. And it's like, I think it's like processing in a lot of ways and like thinking through things. And yeah, I remember walking away from that 3 hours and just being like, at the end of it, like, I have to. Like, wow. There's no way that I can have what I truly want in this life without letting that go. And I just felt so, because I was like my world at that point. And I remember just like, okay, I have no idea what's on the other side of this, but I have to risk it on God. And so I went home, or to my dorm, and, and I like let the person know, and then I was just like, all right, that's a done deal.
I do want to say it's really cool that did you say he was a pastor, Eugene?
No, that's the thing. He was just a normal guy.
Oh,
just like
Eugene.
And this was one of the crazy things about Eugene was like seeing the. You know, actually, that's a really good point to bring up. Was in that first like year of being at Vista was the church. It was crazy for me because I was just seeing these men and women who had families and who were just absolutely living their whole lives for God. The whole church actually had moved from Seattle to plant, and like all these people had kind of just like uprooted their lives to come and do this. And I was like, and just all these insane things. Like, I legit thought that Eugene was getting paid to take me out, because he took me out to lunch every week and paid for me. And like, and I was like, what? And he wasn't. He just did this out of his heart, right? Like, and it was just like seeing people do this kind of thing. Because in my mind, I was like, okay, you go to school, you graduate, and then you have to work really hard and put all of your focus on like your family and your work. But then I was seeing him, and he was living in such a different way, where I was like, you're like leading a small group, you're like helping people's lives change, you're like shepherding people into relationship with Jesus in a deeper way. Wow. And helping people find freedom, and you're doing it at so much cost to yourself, and like you're losing so much time, and you're doing it so freely. That was crazy. Like, so just like seeing things like that, where it was like, oh my gosh, like God makes people crazy. Like, like that was just like really, really cool. So yeah, but
yeah, you might have to link me up with Eugene, bro.
That's what I'm saying. He's buying lunch. Yeah, we don't even have to go to the place, you know.
I also think it's crazy. I mean, this might have been like a few years down the road, but you had that prayer of you wanted to be discipled. Mm-hmm. Is that the correct way to say it?
Yeah, that was
okay.
Good.
There we go.
Yeah. Locked in.
I've messed that up before.
But you're new.
You wanted to be discipled, and it sounds like Eugene kind of did that for you.
Absolutely, and yeah. He answered that prayer in a big way. So that
awesome.
was totally God bringing that guy into my life, which was just so crazy. So yeah, and there was so many different events that took place and like stories that I could tell. Things like I'll tell this like a very brief version of this. I was supposed to live with a group of guys, and in my second year of college, and there was 5 of us, and then there wasn't a sure thing we could get a 5-person room. Our deal was, we'll get a 2 and a 3 if we can't make it happen. And then all these guys started holding grudges against me randomly, and genuinely I've thought through it, I've processed this with people, like the stuff that they told me that they had against me was really petty stuff that like I don't think any of us should have been holding against each other. But they all just decided, they're like, nah, Luke's out. And they just told me like, hey man, like we want to let you know if we can't get a 5-person, like you're out, we're going to just do 4. And I was like,
wow.
What? So I was like, I don't have a housing situation next year. And I was like, this is insane. Like I don't, like literally don't have a place to live. And I was like so afraid of this and didn't know what to do. And then like God just pulls crazy strings and ends up like bringing me into a house with he just kind of put together this group of guys that are all just people who have deep relationship with Jesus. Like one of my friends right now is like a missionary. The other one's like he's a youth pastor, I'm pretty sure, and then just like other guys who are just like full hearts for God, and like they're doing more just like traditional type jobs, but like they're just like all these guys just love God and they're fully pursuing Him, and it was just crazy. Like God took me out of that situation, and like it was so hard for me, but then He puts me in this incredible place where like I got to see guys at like I think we were like probably 19, 20, and I'm seeing guys like who are staying up late but then waking up at 6 a.m. so that they can go and be in Jesus' presence, and I like walk past their rooms hearing them in tears, like hearing them like worship over tears, and like just like seeing them so satisfied, and like just seeing like these crazy things where I was like, how are people like what is, like I've never seen someone like this, like, and it's just so clear that Jesus was just capturing our hearts and just doing all these crazy things. And yeah, it was like just beautiful what I saw Him doing through that time. So yeah, and so many things that God did to show me like His presence and to show me His love for me and His consistency in my life and all that stuff. And then I got to a place where this was a really interesting one, because I remember I went back home and for the summer after my freshman year of college, and God kind of just like very much made some things clear to me, and I ended up backsliding in a number of areas,
Mm-hmm.
and like going back into old sin patterns, and I remember I was like, okay, I'm kind of really walking away from all these things, and God just changed my life, and I'm literally walking back to all these old things, and I felt so much shame, like ridiculous amount of shame. And I remember got to the end of the summer, and my pastor gives me a call, and he was like, hey, I know you're coming back soon, we've been praying about things, and we're wondering if like you would want to like start like a guy's a college group for like a Bible study, and like a community group essentially. And like they didn't have one of those yet for the college, and I was like I can't do that. I need to confess to you that like I've been like struggling with these sin things, and just like in some stuff that I think I shouldn't be in this position because of. And his response to me wasn't like, after everything we did for you, like you did all these wrong things. Like his response to me was like, I'm so sorry that you've been struggling. Like, what, have you been able to talk to anybody about it? Like, what's that been like? He's just like, sin is so tricky. Like, I love you, man. Like, let's talk about it. And then like, at the end of it, he was like, I don't think that this is who you're gonna be. I think you're actually so qualified for all this stuff. Like, let's just roll.
Wow.
And I was like, so blown away, because I was like, just like framed up for like, when you sin, when you do the wrong thing, like you deserve to get hit, like you deserve to get punished, and it's like getting met by such real grace was so crazy. And so I ended up doing that. I led the community group for the college for a good 2 years, and that was like just really cool, getting to see a lot of people and kind of growing the relationships with God, and a lot of people kind of coming out to that. And it wasn't huge. It was like a group of like 15 to 20 people, but it was still like just really, it was really, not always, it was sometimes smaller, but it was it was like a very cool place of just getting to see, like getting to have all these deep relationships and deep conversations about God, and just like worshiping together and praying together, and like just, yeah, it was, I think a lot of people were really, like a lot of us got to be really impacted by that. And I think for me it was like really cool because I was getting to do this as like a leader in the church for the first time. Like I never got to experience that. And so that was like a very, very cool stretch of time.
Yeah, and it's so crazy too, because when you were mentioning that, it brought me back to when you were talking about the losing the election for school, and I was like that's just so much, like, I mean, you just think about God's grace and like his mercy. Like in both of those situations, it was like you were in sin habitually, and it was like,
yeah,
but yet you get these opportunities to lead, and like it, I mean, we've mentioned this on the podcast before, but it's like God doesn't call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And it's just like, come on, like this is a pure example of like, you don't have to be perfect, you're not going to be perfect, in fact, and yet God is still going to use you and still going to work in your life. And that's so beautiful and so powerful. Now that's not a, because of that, let's go sin every day, you know, but it's also like just a testament to God and his character. Like that's so beautiful.
No, it's so true, man. Like, yeah, no, I very much agree with that.
Yeah.
It's also really cool to see that like a lot of like older people were like really good about like mentoring you, kind of, and like helping you through these tougher moments. It just shows like how awesome the Christian community can be, because they were just so willing to help in these darker and like harder times. And it's just sometimes it's all people need is just like someone to be able to listen to them and like talk through whatever dark moment they're in. So
and that's so true, because I think like to that point, Matt, like what I've seen is, I think like we all live in so many lies, and I think that there's like lies for specific like ages too, you know, like genuinely when we're in high school, I think a lot of people are convinced that finding like a relationship that's good can make your entire life whole. Like, and I think like that's like now looking back, we're like, all right, we're all that dummy, right? But like, and I think like there's a lot of people who out here in like San Francisco who are like, if I can have success, I will be like, if I get that job, like I will be whole. And I think it's just like, I think one of the best things from that season, one of the craziest things I think will always impact me is like just how much I got to see through lies that I was believing by seeing their wisdom of life and how the way that they were living. So that was just like, just the necessity of like, just being discipled and talking to people with wisdom. Because like, you'll save so much time not chasing after dumb things, not chasing after things that actually have no promise of life. Like, I just saw so clearly, like, through these people's lives, like, okay, you're building your life on Jesus's way that he taught, and it is so clear that you were flourishing. Like, it was like, I looked at certain people and I was like, you don't have the most, but you're richer than any person I've ever met. Like, and it's just like so clear to me that like what you have found in God is like what you should go after. Like, that is the way to go after it. Like, and it's not like, you know, what I saw in these people wasn't just going after intimacy with God. It was like going after intimacy with God, which then spurred them into pouring into people's lives, like generosity and like denying themselves, like, you know, just all these different ways of just like living their lives like humbly, honestly, like all these things that were just making them able to flourish. Like, I saw people's their marriages be healthier, you know, like because they were in a place where they were genuinely like denying themselves for each other, and they were genuinely having love to give away and all these types of things. So that was just like so massive, getting to see the way that Jesus's way was just impacting these people, and like the way that they had something so beautiful to chase after in him, and the way they were receiving it, like they were receiving like satisfaction from him, and they were receiving love. And so that was just like, yeah, I completely agree. Like discipleship and like just getting to look at people who are older with wisdom, I think is like, it's not always like the sexiest thing to go after in the Christian faith, but I think it is so good and like it'll bless your whole life. So one thing that was like, I kind of forgot to talk about this, but there was a massive progression. Maybe one of the things in my life, like maybe one of the journeys that I've been able to see Jesus work the most through was the relationship thing. And it was so painful, like I mentioned, letting go of that relationship because I had put my whole worth in it. But I remember I went to a conference with that church, and I went in and I talked with one of the pastors there, and he had just prayed for me, and he basically, I told him, I was like, hey man, like, yeah, this is kind of my situation. I feel like I have a really hard time feeling like worth something, because I put so much of my worth in what girls thought of me. And I was like, and dude, frankly, I got dumped like 6 times, like 6 for 6 times out of like all my relationships, and I was just like, and you know, a lot of those were dumb short things for like a couple weeks in high school or something like it. But like it broke my heart over and over again. I just like, I kind of was like in this pattern where, and this was really deep for me, but I was in this pattern of like, I go and like or somebody comes and they're interested in me and they're excited about me, and I think a lot of the times it's because like, you know, people maybe at high school like found me attractive or something like that, but then once they got to know me, it was like, oh, actually you're not that interesting, and it just hurt so bad because it was like, okay, so like my appearance makes me worth something, but nothing else does. Like there's nothing else in me that's worth something.
Wow.
And like I think I really believed that about myself, and so I tried to act different. I tried to be cool, like all those types of things, right? And it was just so difficult for me, like just like having that. So I told him that it's like, yeah, like I feel like there's not much worth in me, like because of that. And what he just told me was like, hey man, like I think honestly what you need is, he pointed to a couple different pastors around the room. He's like, you see those 3 guys right there? Like, and they were like some of the guys who were like helping lead the conference, and they're just like really awesome guys. I was like, yeah. And he was like, all of them when they were in college, like they all did life together. Like they loved each other and were there for each other in a way that was so massive. And they found out that strength isn't in, you know, concealing your emotions, but they actually found out that where you actually become strong is by receiving, as a guy, like the tender but strong love of another dude who can look you in the eyes and help you see your worth and like can point you back to Jesus. And like, and he was just showing me, he was like, there's such a necessity for that. Like you can't, like you need guys like to do this with. And so he was just telling me like they helped each other beat pornography through like confession and honesty, and through loving each other through their failures. Like they helped each other, like, you know, like just draw into intimacy with God. Like they are the people they are in large part because of their relationships with each other. And he was like, so I honestly, what I gotta challenge you to, man, was like, he basically said like, you should go home and you should try to find that type of relationship with people. Like you should try to find that type of relationship with other guys, and just like deep, intimate relationship with guys. And you should really do your best to not date for a good while, like a good while. Just let yourself heal and to let God become your all, and to actually become like truly satisfied in Him. And it took me on this journey, man, because I like went home and immediately started struggling again. Like, and it was just like, I was like, I just didn't know a way of life where I could be known and not have girls in like an intimate place in my heart, right? And like, cause I knew a sad truth at that point. Most guys don't care that deeply and know other guys deeply. And that was super hard. I was like, I don't really want to cut like female relations, like friendship and stuff like that out of my life, because it's like, God, like no guys actually want to like get to know each other that way. Like, so I remember it was like, what are you talking about when you're with guys? You talk about sports? You talk about how cool you are yourself? Or you talk about like, or you talk about like the girl that you're interested in, right? Like, it's just not much else. Like, and so I'm just like,
what if I'm a really cool person?
That's what I'm saying, bro.
Well, Matt, when you do things, but I think like that was super hard, and honestly, God just took me on this journey over the next few years, right? Like, because there was all these moments of like I mentioned, I had a big struggle with like pornography. So God slowly starts to take this out of my life. Like, I'm still struggling. He takes it out to a degree, and then I'll start to struggle again. But I remember after that, I got challenged with that. I was like, okay, I'm gonna really commit to this. And I think I like went from a past with stuff, and then I like was just really distancing myself from relationships. I was like, okay, I'm not gonna date anybody. I'm not gonna be like, romantic with anybody. But then in my sophomore year of college, I still struggled with like, oh, like there's some girls in my church that are really awesome people, and we're all friends, right? And like, and it was like, okay, like we're all hanging out, and like, you know, like, and we're all kind of like in groups, and like some of my best guy friends now, we're there too. But it's like, you know, we're all like hanging out late at night, and like, you know, like you can't like not catch feels in those moments, right? And like, so I think I still had like this like emotional connection with these girls, right? And then I get to the second half of my sophomore year, and then God just tells me like, hey, like through some friends, like, hey, like, do you remember what I asked you to do? And I was like, I don't want to. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna do it though. And I remember the second half of that year, like I distanced myself from a lot of those girls and started trying to go in deeper with the guys, and it was really hard. But it was good. And then I started, and then, you know, comes junior year, and I still had some close relationship with some girls that I knew still needed to go, but I really didn't want it to go. And then once again, one of the other guys in my church, he was one of the pastors at the time. His name was Landon, and he sat down with me, and he was like, hey, like, are you gonna date this girl? And I was like, probably shouldn't. And he was like, I know you guys hang out like a lot. And he was just like, where are you at with this? And like, he had a hard conversation with me. He's like, what would it look like for you to like lay this down? Like, not so that you can, you know, like not hurt this person, but so you can actually be full, right? And also not hurt this person. And I was like, oh, dang, bro. Like, yeah. And he got together with me 3 times. And wow. Like, on the third time I was like, yeah, I'm ready to like let this go fully. But like, we had to go through it together. Like, so I was like, because that was like the last straw of like, I'm really laying down relationships with girls. It took me like 2 years to fully get to that place where I was like able to do that. And I laid it down, and I remember it sucked a lot, because it was like, that was one of my best friends, and I just like lived that like the next few months just feeling super lonely. And like, I lived with a group of guys, and it was the same group of guys, but the previous year we had all been really like going after friendship with each other. I came back and all of a sudden we weren't, and I was like, what is going on? Like, why does nobody want to hang out with each other? Like, everyone's really doing their own thing. It was during COVID time, we were all in a house together. Like, why are we not connecting? Like, nobody's interested in it. Like, nobody wants to hang. Yeah. And I was like, what is going on? And I was like, I guess it just didn't work. But then I go on this trip with a few friends, and we listened to a sermon on friendship. And this sermon is actually from Reality. Wow. And one of the key messages from it was, what if you loved your friends? Or 2 things. One, the reason, like, what's actually at the top of our pyramid as far as relationships, like she said, it's not actually like romantic relationships are at the top, it's actually we're at the top, and that's why romantic relationships are at the top, is because that's what we receive the most from. And I was like, oh dang, that's actually really good.
That's crazy.
And then she said, Jesus essentially calls us to commit to our friends with the same level as he calls us to commit to our wives, essentially. Like, that's actually like the type of commitment you're supposed to have to your friends. Like lay down your life for a brother. Like, it's not just for your wife. Like, lay down your life for a brother, right? And so, like, I remember I talked to this friend, and I was like, dude, have you ever actually tried to love a friend like more than you love yourself, or like, you know, to the same level you're actually trying to love yourself? And we were like, honestly, man, no. And we're like, bro, like, what if we try to do this together? Like, what if we just start like trying to pursue this friendship with the same level of like commitment as like, you know, like that you would pursue a dating relationship with? And like, we're like, but we're not dating, so
gotta set this.
we were joking around, like,
yeah.
but we were, we went in on that, and that was insane, because that ended up being my best friendship I've ever had, and I healed so much in that friendship, like so much in that friendship, like just moments with this guy where we both got to just like open up some of our deepest wounds with each other, like, and it came up naturally through friendship. It wasn't like we were like, okay, so what's your area that you need healing? It was like, we just hung out like almost every day, and like we're always like, you know, different times where it's like, he's like, bro, I'm like not doing too hot, and I was like, bro, I literally just want to go to sleep. But I was like, okay, no, I made him a promise, I'm gonna like pursue him the way I pursue myself, and like, so I drove and hung out with him, and like he came over to me all the time and like picked me up when I was down and stuff, and like we were just there for each other, and we were just like best friends. Like, it was like super fun. Like, this dude, his name's Ethan, like one of my favorite people. Like, he is just awesome. But he, at one point, like, we start bringing up some girl stuff, and then we bring up some of our deepest insecurities, and he's convinced that a girl that he likes would rather be with me for some reasons, and I'm convinced that he's dead wrong because he's the better man than I am, and we both just got to tell each other why we felt that way, and just cried some really, really big tears, because it was just like, man, this hurts, and I don't like that I feel this way about you, and I don't like that you bring this stuff up in me, right? And like, but it was just like this moment where I got to tell him, like, dude, you're so dumb if that's what you think your worth is. Like, this is what your worth actually is. And I was just telling him, I was like, bro, the only thing that I have is like a face. Like, I don't have like any depth to me. Like, I'm not like worth something like that. Wow. And he just got to affirm me. He's like, bro, like, your appearance is like the least interesting thing about you. He's like, you have been so changed by God. Do you see how you live your life now? And he was just like, you were such, like, he just like spoke these things about me. Like, he told me, like, you were such an honorable man of God. Like, look at how you live your life. Like, look at the way you're impacting those around you. Like, and he just showed me, like, he was like, this is who God actually says that you are, and like this very real moment, and like, and it was crazy, because it was just like God just did this crazy healing, where if I hadn't let go of that relationship with that girl, like with that, like just like that friendship, like I would have never had that, like, you know. And it was this crazy thing, just finding this deep healing, and just finding like, wow, like friendship with guys is so important, because it can just heal wounds that like we need healed. So that was insane. And we just ended up like, funny enough, we actually both got in relationships after like a 6-month stretch, that we went hard at friendship, and then like I went home for the summer, he stayed there and stuff, but we both then got in relationships, and it was crazy because it felt so much like that was the thing that needed to happen for God to kind of like release me to actually go and be ready for a relationship again. And the girl that I'm now, like, that I dated then, like, is now my wife, and it was like crazy, because the things that like God used Ethan to heal, like, if he didn't, like, I don't know how Shauna and I would be, you know, like, I don't know, like obviously we have a ton of struggles, right? Like, we're a young married couple, of course we're gonna have them, but I think like there's so many deep things that we don't have to struggle with because of that. And like so much of our knowing who we are, and not coming, like, I didn't have to come to her to find my worth. I came to her with my worth, because God had showed me it through these relationships, through himself, like. And I remember before I got in this relationship with Shauna, I remember just when I'd have my quiet time with God, I was getting to a place where I was like, I don't need a relationship. I'm really satisfied. Like, and it was like so sick, where I was like, wait, I think you're actually enough for me now. Because I think like God being enough, I think, has always been a confusing thing for me, because I was like, well, yeah, God's enough, but also if I don't drink water, I'm probably gonna die. But like, I think like, you know, God has a way of living, and I think it's like his way, like the things that he calls us into is enough. Like, to deny ourselves to live in his ways, like, you know, it brings us into a way of life, and it's, yeah. So I think he truly did become enough, because I saw like, wow, he's brought these like relationships with like these guys into my life, and he's brought like these mentors, and he's brought like all these beautiful things that are like enriching me and helping me to flourish, you know. And so it was crazy just seeing like the way that he really did become enough for me. And I just don't think I was ever gonna actually, I don't think I was out on this journey to actually just be fully satisfied in God, like, because I had this belief where it was like the way to be whole is to like look to God alone to satisfy you, and like, and I was like, is that ever actually gonna be true of me? And it became true of me in that time, and I was so
awesome.
excited, where I was like, wow, like God is, like I'm rejoicing in my quiet time. I feel like he's giving me this beautiful love, and he's assuring me of who I am. He's like helping me see like just all these different things too. Like he, like I remember during that season he told me very clearly, like through some people like in the church, like you are a man now, and it's time to start living like a man and not like a boy. And like he called me into manhood, which is like not something that a lot of people get to have like someone call them into, which is saved me so much confusion. Like he showed me so much in that season. He told me like that was a massive season of me seeing that I had gone from death to life. Like he showed me what had happened, because I think, like I mentioned, like I didn't have a day where I became a Christian in a lot of, like in one way, and so I think it was years of figuring out what that really meant. And I think he was showing me, he was like, you are no longer the sinful person that you once were. Like that person has been put to death. You are a new creation. You are a new person. And like he showed me that in such a real way, and I was like living it and knowing it and loving it, and like that was such a dope season of life. I really loved it, and then I got to meet Shauna, and that story was awesome because Ethan literally was like, okay, bro, you need to either take this girl on a date or you need to stop listening to her SoundCloud.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So funny.
Dang, she was a rapper? That's
bro. Okay,
all right, come on.
But yeah, she made like this like bedroom pop / like a ton of harmonies and like just super dreamy music that was like so good. And like, oh my gosh, bro.
Yeah, that's a W friend.
One sec, bro.
Yeah, pull it up.
Come
on. Yeah, drop the SoundCloud.
Let's
go.
Shauna Fatahi, if you want to look her up.
Yeah, look her up. Come on.
Here's her song, bro. She has 166,000 on one of her songs.
Yo.
And she didn't even promote it. Like she sort of just got there, but this song got me.
That's beautiful.
Man.
So you understand now.
I know the people listening back home, they're like, oh, I gotta download.
But yeah, she oh man, it was crazy. Like Ethan kind of just like was like, dude, you gotta stop. You gotta like reach out to her, and I didn't know this at the time, but apparently if you listen a lot to somebody's SoundCloud, you might become their top listener, and they might know that you're listening. And we had like our whole story was funny because I like, just to paint this picture, I think this is actually probably helpful. I like did not do that path towards like, you know, becoming fully for God and like taking girls out of my life and like making God fully my worth and everything. Like I definitely struggled, right? Like I was impure in different ways, and I like didn't give my God my full heart at a lot of points, and like, you know, I was like, I struggled along the way, and God had so much grace to still bring me along that journey, which just showed me something. Like this is something I've been learning recently about God that I didn't know until more recently. But God is like not somebody who is like, hey, you have a chance to become someone, and I might make you that person if you work really hard. Like God is somebody who's like, I'm gonna marry you because I'm gonna give my whole self to you, and I'm just, if you just continually sin against me, I'm gonna suffer. It's gonna hurt me so bad because you're sinning directly against me. Like the same way that if like a husband was just to cheat on his wife a bunch, like, or like a wife was to cheat on their husband, like it'd like break their heart. But like God was like, but I'm never gonna leave, and I'm gonna stay with you through the messy pain of it, and I'm gonna like be there, and I'm gonna make sure that you become the person that like I've given you like the potential to become. And like that was so crazy for me realizing that recently. It's just like when I sin, this like in no way convincing him to leave me. Like, sin damages me, and it hurts our relationship, and so that's why we don't sin, and like it's just so bad for us. But I think just like realizing like he's just like, I want you to become all you're meant to be, and I want you to live into perfection essentially, so that you can be free of all the pain, experience full freedom. And I think he's just been showing me that. And I think that this story was such a testament of that, because I like went astray so many points in this journey. Like Shauna, right? Like right before Ethan and I got close, I actually like DM'd her. The song that I played, I heard that and I was like, shoot, bro! I reached out to her and like just complimented the song. We had like a mutual connection, like I mentioned in the past, and yeah, she messaged back and like I didn't really expect her to message back like that, but she was just like really like hey, like, oh, this guy's reaching out. And she knew that I was a Christian, and she knew that she'd heard good things about me and stuff, but I don't think she knew I was in a season of like being single, and so like you know, she thought, you know, a guy's reaching out and like have a conversation, you know, maybe he's the guy, and I shouldn't have reached out. But then we ended up having like this incredible conversation, like where I got to know her way too much and liked her way too much, and like she liked me way too much. We literally probably DM back and forth for like 6 hours. It started with like messages, then it became like audio messages, and then we were sending videos. Yeah, that's bro, I was not supposed to be talking to this girl, right? So she kind of like said something at the end, like a day later. She was like, hey, like, essentially saying like, hey, like I'm assuming you're gonna like, you know, like, are you not gonna like ask me out after that? Like, we were really intentional with each other. Essentially, she kind of just like, hey, like, if you're gonna talk to somebody like that, you should probably do something about that. Have some intention with that, right?
Wow, and I love Shauna's. That's legit. Come on,
she was so dope. Like, I learned through this process, like, do not settle for something less. Like, God wants to, like he will give you something so good if you will genuinely become the person who lives into it. Like, and he'll change you. You should give him time. You trust in him. Like, he'll do that. So, but beautiful. Yeah, then we stopped talking. I apologized for essentially leading her on and like didn't really give much explanation. The song that I said has 166K right now. She wrote that song. It's called I Sat With Jesus, and it's about her dealing with the bitterness of like me having kind of like turned her down, because she did not have a single relationship.
Wait, that song, that's
not the one I played. I didn't play. It's called I Sat With Jesus, and it's actually a beautiful song because it's her processing it, and she's basically saying like, I sat with Jesus, told him I'm bitter. He said he sang me a song and said, Shauna, remember, we're all only human. Like, don't forget the kind of grace that I gave you. Wow. Like, and it was just this beautiful process of like, she was actually processing it, and like, she fully forgave me. And this is one of the crazy things was in my past with girls, like where I had like made mistakes and like that. I always received the punishment that I should receive for that. Yeah. Like, it was always like, you jerk, like you were like not cool with me. But then 6 months go by, and I'm like, I can't reach out to this girl again, Ethan. Like, I messed it up already. And he's like, bro, reach out. You gotta reach out. I was like, all right, like, I guess I have to. So I reach out, and then she basically shows me that she's like, hey, like, completely forgiven. Like, I was like waiting for a sign from God to know whether I should actually pursue it with her. And like, I didn't hear a sign, and we were like talking back and forth, and then I was like, okay, maybe we shouldn't talk. And then like, her exit from that, because I basically said like, hey, we shouldn't date, or we shouldn't try a date, because I just really didn't want to hurt her again since all that. And then she just basically says like, hey, all good, and just so you know, like, everything's fully forgiven, like, I don't hold anything against you. She said this quote, there's so much grace. And I was just like, I've never heard someone say that to me after I screwed up so much in this setting. And I was just like, I literally was like, I need to take this girl out on a date. And so we went on a date, and I saw pretty quickly, oh my gosh, she is so incredible, but also so spiritually mature, and that scared the heck out of me, because I didn't believe in myself in that space with my spiritual maturity. I was still doubting myself to a degree. Wow. And yeah, I was like, I remember our second date, she told me all about like, she's like, yeah, like all the different words that Christians have spoken over her life, and what God's going to do with her life, and different things different callings and things. And I was all like, dang, that's sad that I can't date this girl anymore. I was like, yeah, I'm not really good enough for any of that. Like I'll probably get in the way. Like, but bro, now we're here, and like I'm actually like playing a part in like her living these things out. Like God has like just continued to like God just continues to grow us, man. Like we will give him our hearts and just seek him. Like he's continued to grow me. He's continued to show me who I am and stuff, and it's just been beautiful. So that was a really, really beautiful story of just like seeing the way that God took me on this whole journey like of transformation. I had to trust him so many times. Like, oh my gosh. Like one other thing I'll say, like right before Shauna and I went on our first date, like a few days before, I like doubted myself, and I was like, I don't think I could be with a girl of this caliber, essentially, in faith. I don't think I'm at that level, and I think I struggled with like I like had a struggle with pornography and went in deep with that again, and I called my friend afterwards feeling so much shame, and he basically told me like, that's not who you are. Remember who you are. Like it's like, and you just prayed it over me and stuff. And then a couple days later, I went on that first date, and I've never watched porn again. Like,
wow.
Yeah, like, and it's been like coming up on 3 years of that, and like just complete freedom from it. Like it's completely just out, which is crazy. Like right before I went on that first date, like God completely stripped that away. Like, which has just been beautiful. Like I now it's like I don't even. It's a kind of a weird thing for me to like think back to that, because it's like it's just like crazy the way that he will fully take out sins that hurt us. Like he will fully take out the things that bring us shame. Like so, oh my gosh, like so thankful for that. And the one last thing that I'll share about like, you know, the early days of that relationship. The last time that I ever saw the person that like my ex was at like a worship night that we both went to, and I was like, we knew it was like, today's the end. Like this is the last time like we have to say goodbye. And it was crazy because the person leading that worship night that I was feeling like an absolute failure at, and I was feeling so ashamed, and I was feeling like, there's God, you're asking me to lay down the best thing I have in my life. Like, is there actually anything good ahead? Shauna was leading that worship night. That was the first time I'd ever been in the room with Shauna. I'd never met her. We've never been in the room together before. And right in front of me, while I'm like having to lay this thing down, God has my wife in the room. Like I had no clue, and it was insane. Like I was just like, I realized that like halfway through the relationship, and I was blown away. Like every time I talk about it, I'm like, oh my gosh, like it becomes like more and more meaningful. I'm like, God, like that's crazy that you did that. Yeah. God was so good right there. So that was crazy. Just so full circle. Like I don't know, like if he's ever calling, like I guess that could be another cheesy thing we could say that's very true. But like if there's ever a time he's calling us into something and we're like, is it actually going to be worth it? Like he probably already has the thing in mind that's going to be better than it for us. Like he's probably already like faithfully thinking of how to satisfy us in a better way. So that was crazy, man. Like God was just so good in that way. But yeah, and then I'd say the next step in like faith was a hard one for me. Like very hard. I came back, the church that I was a part of started to struggle. There was like some church hurt stuff going on. Some like different people were kind of saying some things about the church. Like there was some division in it and stuff, which was really sad. I don't think all of it was legit. There was some things that were like maybe legit, but it was like really hard. And I like stopped leading. I got asked to stop leading. It wasn't really because, it wasn't like they were like, oh, like they kind of were just like, oh, maybe if you're going home next year, like just like process your like leaving. It wasn't like because of the division, that it was more just like, oh, the church is a little smaller right now. Maybe just like, we don't need you to lead a small group this year. And I was like, okay. And I thought that like, it was gonna be alright. But then like a lot of the people who were leading me in the church when that happened, they kind of stopped leading me and kind of like stopped being as involved. Eugene stayed consistent, but a lot of other people that were like really big voices in my life like kind of subsided, and I started to feel really confused by that. And it was really weird because I had a lot of leadership, like all the pastors, all the pastoral staff was like, I knew them very deeply. Like, I think I was like tight with the lead pastor. Like he was kind of like a second father to me, type of deal. And when I went from like talking to them like once a week to I think I talked to them, I don't know, like 3 times that year, and I was in their church, so it was like really disorienting. And I was like, I learned something the very hard way that through that whole process, don't follow a person, follow Jesus, because every person that you can put your hope in is probably going to fail you in some big way. Like you're gonna realize at every point that somebody's a person. And I think I really hoped that wasn't true, because it's harder to follow Jesus than to follow a person. And so now I'm having to learn that, like, in our current church, right? Like, I'm like, okay, like, I'm like, don't hope that, like, Dave Wilmus picks you out of the crowd to, like, become, like or, like, that, like, I don't know, like, Kevin or whoever, you know, that they're, like, gonna become homies with you and show you the way. It's like, no, Jesus is showing you the way. Learn the way from Jesus, because he loves you so consistently. And like, it's been hard, and it's like having to unlearn that. But yeah, I think Jesus was so. I think that this is what I've heard as a consistent story and a consistent thread. Check it, of course. But what I've seen is that God will. When someone first comes to faith, he gives them a lot of what I've heard called consolation. So consolation being a lot of his felt presence. Very freely, and it's not actually really coming from anything you're doing. It's kind of just given freely. It's like just God is just showing himself to you. And then he matures you over some time, where he makes you somebody who needs to start seeing him by faith, and needs to, like, even when you don't see anything, like, and I don't like that part of the process. And I think, like, I got really disoriented because I was like, okay, the leaders that were in my life in a huge way are kind of like not in my life in the same way, and also like I don't feel God's presence half as much. I was like, was anything that I experienced legit? Like, I questioned it all. Like, I was like, what is this? And like, but I was like, but I couldn't shake it. I was like, I'd be so dumb to say that stuff wasn't legit. It was crazy. Like, I shared like a fifth of it, like, if that, you know, like, there's so much that he did. Like, I genuinely, I tasted it, and I saw like the goodness of the Lord. Like, I experienced how beautiful he was and the way that he made me whole. Like, you know, even at my worst day, like, I can't shake that there's something so good in him. It's just, maybe I just don't get to taste it as freely on that day, you know, but it doesn't mean that it's not true, and it doesn't mean that I shouldn't live for it, because Jesus is coming back, and because Jesus does love us in a way that is so true, whether we feel it or not. And so I've had to learn, like, truth over feelings and meaning over emotion. Like, just like, those are so important. Just like having to, like,
I gotta write that down,
yeah,
dude. Like, that's just like, you're just
it's one of the more slightly growing parts of, like, my faith thus far. But like, I think just like, even like on the drive over, dude, like, I'm like, okay, I'm not feeling your presence, and I'm feeling disoriented, and I can't sense you, and I'm like having a very hard time picturing the throne of heaven. Are you here? Like, do you love me? Am I actually safe? Like, these work things that I'm going through these days, like, am I actually going to be okay? Or do I have to start hustling harder because maybe you're not as here as I thought you were? And like, it's just like, but I have to, like, come back to truth over feelings, like, meaning over emotion. Like, no, like, I know what's true. Like, I know I've seen what's true. I have to, like, cling to it. And like, that's been hard. It's been definitely hard, but it's like, it's maturing, and it's good for us. And I think, and I've heard a lot of people say that while it's less fun, it's so much more important, because like, without like I think there's the verse about hope. Like, it says, you hope for something that you have not yet seen, or something you do not yet have. If you already had it, it would not be hope. Like, and that's like that's what we're in. Like, we're having to hope in something that we don't fully have yet. Like, we don't fully live in God's, like, unveiled presence right now. Like we
Yeah.
we have Jesus in a very real way, but we're in the like the already not yet right now, where like he has not come back and made everything new, which he will do. For our listeners that may not know that, like Jesus is genuinely gonna come back and make everything new and like make us all whole, like all the crazy stuff. Like he's gonna give us new bodies, like he's going to give us like complete bodies, like, and he's going to wipe away every tear from our eyes, and like, and it's gonna be perfect, and it's gonna be so really cool.
I'm gonna be like 6'8". Come on, man. Let's just be real. Like, God, no.
Dang, bro, it's crazy, dog. Yeah. But yeah, so that's. Yeah, I think. I forgot what I was saying. Where was I right before I became one? Yeah, before the Jesus is coming back.
Man, it was so good. I was
so much. I think it was about like
importance to like the harder stuff is important.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll hop in with that. Maybe it was that, but maybe there's something else, but I can't remember. But yeah, I think I've just seen that. I've heard a lot of people say that while the early days of extreme felt presence are so good and so full, the days where you're older and you have deep trust, no matter whether you feel it or not, those are the days where you're the most free, actually. And that's actually where you actually start to walk in, like you can have just a lot more peace in it, a lot more like just walk more faithfully with God. Like it's just it becomes easier in that, like, to just know him, like to you don't doubt him as often. And like talks in, like Paul says, like you're not swayed by every false wind of doctrine, like you're not like, you know, thrown back and forth all the time by everything you hear, like you're not constantly doubting as much. So and like I know that it's not like, oh, you experience God's presence and then you stop. Like that's not it. Like I have experienced his presence so much over these last few years, but it's just like it's harder to see it. And it's like I have to choose faith more often. And so it's like more like you will still in the later years of faith, like, oh my gosh, of course, feel his love and know him. But I think it's like then you have to, it's a lot like falling in love, actually. Like it's like very much like that. Like and I'm not being original right here. I'm talking about a C.S. Lewis quote. Actually, let me pull that quote up real quick. Really good quote.
That's so good. I just want to say, like, while you're pulling this up, like, there's so many moments that you've just been blessing me in this podcast. Like, there's so much stuff you've talked about that's just so, like, it feels like, it just makes me so grateful that we're taking this opportunity, because, like,
for sure,
God is, like, speaking to me every time, and it's just so powerful. But
Dude,
I'm very
so
blessed by you being on, so thank you.
I'm so glad you guys are doing this. This is really cool seeing you guys' obedience and like what's gonna come out of this. So very cool. Yeah. I'll read this quote. So being like, relationship with God is a lot like marriage. God literally made marriage to reflect what it is to be with God and have a relationship with God. And so looking into what is marriage like can tell you a lot about what is a relationship with God like. There's a lot of parts in the Bible where we talk about like we are the bride and he is the groom, and like we will be fully married, which is just so beautiful. Like just so incredible. It's because like the most like incredible feelings you'll ever experience in life are ultimately like between two people, or ultimately what's within marriage. Like we're not kids like sex, right? Like, and that's like literally God said like what you experience in marriage is like what I experienced with you, but that's like nothing compared to what we will experience. Like the deepest like pleasures and ecstasies of life, like the best things like are with me, which is so crazy. So wow. But so that to that quote that I was saying from C.S. Lewis in his book Mere Christianity. It's kind of a long one, but I think it's really good, so I'll read it. It says, being in love is a good thing, but it is not the best thing. There are many things below it, but there are also many things above it. You cannot make it the basis of a whole life. It is a noble feeling, but it is still a feeling. Now, no feeling can be relied on to last in its full intensity or even to last at all. Knowledge can last, principles can last, habits can last, but feelings come and go. And in fact, whatever people say, the state called being in love usually does not last. If the old fairy tale ending, they lived happily ever after, is taken to mean they felt for the next 50 years exactly as they felt the day before they were married, then it says what probably never was nor ever would be true, and would be highly undesirable if it were. Who could bear to live in all that excitement for even 5 years? What would become of your work, your appetite, your sleep, your friendships? But of course, ceasing to be in love need not mean ceasing to love. Love in this second sense, love as distinct from being in love, is not merely a feeling, it is a deep unity, maintained by the will and deliberately strengthened by habit, reinforced by, in Christian marriages, the grace which both partners ask and receive from God. They can have this love for each other even at those moments when they do not like each other, as you love yourself even when you do not like yourself.
Wow.
They can retain this love even when they would easily, if they allowed themselves, be in love with someone else. Being in love first moved them to promise fidelity. This quieter love enables them to keep the promise. It is on this love that the engine of marriage is run. Being in love was the explosion that started it. And that quote is crazy. Like it's like just this thing of like being in love then versus like choosing to love. And like I think like the part where we talked about like it's habit deliberately strengthened by the will, like that keeps it consistent. Because like I've seen that now, it's like I have to show up, you know, like what husband do you like, what marriage do you think is going to be good if they stop going on dates with each other, right? Like in the beginning you can literally just text each other and make the other person's heart swing, right? But then like as you get into the you know like later years of marriage, like you are not going to have that simple like just your text is going to make you like your face light up. Like you're still going to love each other of course, but it's not like the same like early days of just like pure bliss. You start to realize the other person's a real person, and like it's like it gets more real, and so it's like you have to make deliberate time to go on dates. And like that's one of the things like in our culture I feel like you don't see a lot of married couples like a lot of married couples stop going on dates. Like they stop pursuing each other, like they don't build that habit, they don't build out that will, and so then you don't see them having this beautiful flourishing relationship. You know, they're married, like they are absolutely married, but they're not like actively pouring into their love. They're not like sparking that fire to keep it going, you know. And so I think with God, that's what I found is like I need at this point to start, not to start, like I think it's like this means you just have to keep on doing, but I think to make space to essentially go on dates, like to make space to go and be with him alone in his presence. It's not like he's gonna be mad at us if we don't, but I think like just seeing like we'll miss out on a lot, you know, because he wants to give us a lot of love. And I've had to like make habits. I've had to like right now I'm in a process of like, oh, I could like on my job I could easily be like asked to start work at like 6 a.m. like for like East Coast hours, right? And that's not always, but my last job I was like starting at 7:30 3 times a week, and it was like, oh man, like back in college I'd wake up at like 8 or 9 every day. And so it was like, okay, like if I want to be with Jesus, I need to make a habit in my life of like waking up at an hour that I really don't like waking up at, so that I can make sure that I have time with him before the day starts. So it's so quiet, right? And like so it's like it's building that habit and like deliberately strengthened by the will. Like I have to will myself out of bed like will myself to actually be with him. And like when we do that, that's how you kind of like maintain this deep relationship where he is the source of the love in the relationship, like he's the giver of it, but if we don't show up, we're never gonna be able to like actively receive it. We just have nowhere to go. So I think that's the state that I'm in now of like building the habits and like doing all that type of stuff. And I gotta say, like recently, like God has been showing me, he's been calling me into like a type of prayer that I haven't practiced much with, like contemplative prayer. And essentially what that is like, it's contemplating rather than speaking. So like you just sit really still, let yourself be really quiet, and you can do it multiple ways. Some ways that I've done it, that I've heard from people, you can, no, you're good, yeah. You can take a scripture, like one verse. Like one that I took was like, even before he formed the foundations of the world, God chose you and loved you to, or like chose you to be like loved in Christ Jesus, or something. It's something along those lines. Like I paraphrase, but like you just sit there and you say, before, and then you just think about, and like that led me to like, oh whoa, like there was a time before anything was created, like even before God. Like even like there's a time before it was just literally just God, like, and then you just think about like, you know, even before they made the foundation of the world, you think about creation, like it's like, and it can lead you into all these deep things where like you're just like seeing these things in a really quiet and still place. And I think like recently what I've been seeing is like when I get to that really quiet place, and it's so hard, it's so hard for me to make that space. Like there's something in me that really wants to resist it, but when I make space for it, which to this day is not often, but I'm working on that right now. What I find is I hear him more, and I actually experience his love. Like I actually get to a place where I get to know it, you know, like, and it's so good when I do. Like, I don't know, like yesterday morning, like I was in that spot, and I feel like I got up and I had to help Shauna with something real quick, but when I was going, I was like, I literally felt this like longing in my heart to go back and get quiet again to be with God. And I was like, wow. I haven't felt that way in a minute. And I was like, I literally want to go be in his presence. And I was like, when I'm gazing at Jesus, he's showing me how good he is, and like how beautiful he is, and he's drawing me into himself. I'm like, dang, like I'm experiencing his love, and it feels real nice. Like, I really like that. Yeah. And so that's like, I think just like been really cool for me with just like, just learning to gaze at Jesus. And like I've just seen a lot of parallels I honestly don't normally see, but like one of the pastors, maybe you guys have heard of him, maybe not, but John Mark Comer, he's close with Dave as well. He wrote a book that I'm reading right now that talks a lot about like discipleship to Jesus, and it talks about contemplation and that type of prayer. And essentially this whole thing was like, if you want to become a person of love, if you want to become like Jesus, the way to do it is literally just to sit with him and to look at him. Like you, like he said, like you become what you look at in a lot of ways. And so he was saying like, you need to make space to just sit with Jesus quietly and to let him love you. And as he does, because he wants to, and I'm learning that, like that's becoming a thought that comes more regularly, but it has not been. That's not necessarily what I've always thought about God, but he's starting to show me that's actually what's true. But as we sit with him, as we gaze on him, and just like look at him in all different aspects, the way he looks at us, the way he lived, like his character, all these things, like we start to get really drawn in, and then we start to have a lot more love to give, and then like it's just this whole beautiful thing. Like he like. I think that John Mark Comer references this thing where he says like, he says like, it's not something he says. I think it's something in psychology right now that's very known and very talked about, where it's like you will love to the degree that you've been loved. It's just a pretty known rule. And so he's saying like, if you don't make space to come and just sit with Jesus, you're probably not going to be a very loving person. But if you are loved consistently by Jesus, like you're going to become a very loving person. And so that's been really cool, just getting to like see some of that stuff. And
yeah, I want to bring back a point. I know it's just been really just stuck on my mind, and I think it's beautiful, like when you mentioned this idea of marriage, and it really reminded me of the sermon that we had in the church a couple weeks ago, or like the series on love. And I think one of the craziest things was they talked about like how I think it was at church. It might, now that I'm thinking about it, it might not have been, but regardless, it was, I think it was Dave, and he was talking about how at marriage, like, you come up to the altar, and I think it really ties into like a lot of the stuff we've been talking about throughout this podcast, and like this idea of like at the altar, like when you're getting married, you're like at the altar, you're dying to yourself. And
Dave got real intense. He's like,
yeah,
you come here to die.
Yes,
like,
yes.
Yeah, that's a chill thing to say on your wedding day.
I know. And it's like how much so, like, or how much more, like, when you do this, like, for God, how much more is he gonna bless your life when it's like you're like just thinking about like you sitting in his presence, like waking up early and like actively making time to just, like, you're tired, you have work in a couple hours, and it's like, you know what, I can wake up early, not for me, or not because I'm like, you're not gonna get more money at work, you're not gonna get more friends, whatever, like, you're just looking at God, and how much greater is that than like anything in the world, like, really, like, and it's like, I just think it's so beautiful that like, because I also, like, I mean, Francis Chan talks about it all the time, and it's like, or I guess not all the time, but it was a sermon that Ethan shared with me, and it was like, as guys especially, like, being the bride is such a weird concept, and but like when I had that perspective like put on me, because I never, like, I mean, I read it and I was like, oh yeah, like, sure, like, you know, I mean, like, yeah, I guess I like sure, if God wants that, like, whatever, like, but it's like, I'm like, really, like, one time I really thought about it, and one time, like, for communion, Francis says this like great thing on, like, for communion, like, act like you're going up to the altar and like try and like be married to God in this moment, and it's really like reshaped how I've thought about this. And it's like, I'm looking at like, but then it's even like crazy, like, because I read the other day, it was like, I was talking with a girl about Proverbs 31, and it was like, whoa, like, we are also a Proverbs 31 girl, like, I mean, like, obviously it's for women, but it's like equally as much for us, and throughout the Bible, like, when it's talking about women, it's equally as much for us. Just like on the flip side, for women, it's also equally as much. I mean, there's certain things that are clearly like different, but it's also, you know, like, yeah. But it's like, whoa. And then it like caused me to reevaluate everything, because it's like, if I'm the bride of Christ, like, there's so much that is like, whoa, like, I have to, I mean, there's like just a different way of approaching that relationship with God, and it's like, I have to surrender all these things, because ultimately, like, I look to him, and it's like, man, come on. It's and then it just makes me like, it's so encouraging to hear like yours and Shauna's relationship, and just like your guys' both willingness to just like recognize, like, you're two beautiful young adults who are married.
Thanks, bro.
And yeah, that's what I'm saying. Well, come on, what did I tell you? What I tell you when you walked up the stairs? I was like, yo, your hair looks beautiful. That but it's like, you guys are in this amazing and beautiful relationship, and like, I mean, like you said, it's not perfect, but from an outside perspective, it's like, oh, they have it all going, and they all are doing these things. But at the same time, it's like, you're sitting here telling us, like, and you're not like, oh, look at what I'm doing. You're pursuing God first, right? Like, it's like you woke up in the morning pursuing God, and then did something for Shauna. And it's like, okay, what if you weren't pursuing God and Shauna asked you to do something? Maybe you're a little like, oh, you know what? Like, I don't want to get out of bed right now. Like, you know, but it's like, in you pursuing God, like, first, primarily. And not that it's perfect, because, like, I mean, it's not going to be. But it's still like that focus on him is just like, come on. Like, that's so beautiful and so powerful.
So
And you, like, you didn't do it from a place of your own, like, when you did the thing for Shauna, you didn't do it from your own love. It was God's love that he had poured out into you
That
to
is so
overflow
true.
into him,
That is so
into her. But then, how much does he give you that it's like, you just did that for her out of love, and she was grateful for that, and I'm sure your guys' day was great as a result of that. No, like, realistically. And then, looking back, you finished doing the task, and God gave you so much love that you were like, you know what? Let me get back in the room and, like,
Yeah.
be in that love. Like, come on. Like, your cup was empty.
Different source.
Your
yeah.
cup was empty. He filled your cup so much it overflowed into Shauna, and then now you're
Dude,
like, come on.
That's
like,
so crazy. Like, I remember this is like a metaphor that I feel like God gave me
yeah.
back in dating. That was like, or back in singleness. That was crazy. Was I feel like what he showed me was. He was like, "You're a broken glass right now,
Whew.
and I'm pouring love into you, but it's just falling out."
Wow.
Like, it was like, you can't hold anything right now. There's so many cracks. You need to give me time for me to heal you and to close those cracks and to like put you back together so that I can actually fill you to a place where you can overflow. And like, it was so good.
That's
like,
awesome.
I think I said in my vows too, like about to Shauna, I was like, I had this dream of once I met God, like meeting somebody at a place where I was so satisfied, and I like my hands are up in worship to God, and I look to my right, and like the person next to me is also hands up worship to God, and we're both so satisfied, and then we come to each other in a place of wanting each other rather than needing each other. And it was like, that's such a beautiful thing that God gives us a chance to, because like that can't exist without God. Like it's crazy, because yeah, I'm so with you, man. Like you get access to this different source. And I think back on this day, actually, it wasn't when we were dating or when we were married. This was like a while back, like a year and a half or so ago. But I remember Shauna and I, like, she came over, like, she loves the morning, so she drove over, and like we went and like caught the sunrise or something like that, I think. And we went on a walk and stuff, and it was good. I think I was a little bit like I just wasn't like in the best spirits, but I was like, I was there, you know.
You were happy.
Like,
she
I
was
showed
happy.
up. I was present.
Yeah, you're happy. She was
like,
happy.
Yeah, exactly.
I like
and then we just go on the day, and it was fun. Like, actually, we enjoyed some cool views and stuff, and had a nice time. But then we go back, and neither of us got our quiet time. So we're like, you want to like go like do some quiet time? Like, and I think we went over to my brother's place, and we all sat at the table. We all did our own quiet time. And I remember just getting filled with so much joy. And then I remember just like, I got up from the table and went over to Shauna and just gave her the biggest hug. And I just felt like, I was like, that's what I wanted to do at that moment. And it was such a clear moment of like, yo, like, this is you before and after experiencing time with God. Like, it just gives you this feeling, you know? And like, this is just like, honestly convicting me a bit, because I definitely need to like make it a priority to like be in his presence and like go after him first. Like this morning, like literally, dude, I this is just like me like confessing a little bit, but I like woke up, and like the last few days God has been so good. Like I said, like literally yesterday he made me like, he left me wanting more, right? And this morning I woke up and I just had this thought. I love cooking, and I was like, what if I bake croissants? And like, I don't have YouTube right now. I've like been taking some, like, our church is doing good social media fast, and like it's been really good for me. But then I was like, no, I'm like gonna download YouTube like before my quiet time. I'm gonna like watch like a recipe, like watch a YouTube video on how to make croissants. And then just like the idea of making croissants was so beautiful to me. Like straight up, I was like, dude, I want to do this so bad. And then I was like, oh, like, yeah, I can still have quiet time with God after, but I knew that I was putting him second. And then I just kept going, and I put him second more, and then I watched a little more of the video and stuff, and then I did my quiet time, and he was still really kind to me, like, honestly, all the way through, even though I kind of really put him on the back burner. But now I'm just like looking at it, I'm like, my day would have been so much better if I didn't think about croissants first. And then like literally midday, I was like, dang, making croissants seems really hard. And I was like, I'm probably still gonna do it, but like, I don't even know if they'll turn out good. And I was like, dang, I really should not have like put these over God. I was like, dang it, dude. Like, I'm so stupid. Like, and I think it's like, I don't know, like, it's just convicting me, like, seeing, like, thinking back to how much love I had in my heart in those moments. And, like, and it's like all these little things that can seem more beautiful than God. And that brings me back to, like, this is, like, something that clicked in my head that's really cool. I see all these things, like, between, like, I don't know, you know how sometimes you're like, oh, you've heard of a marriage metaphor that it was used to point you to God and relationship with him. But this was something where I heard somebody talk about marriage randomly, and then, like, I'm realizing how much it applies to relationship with God, which is really cool. But the gazing on God thing, right? Like, basically what Comer's saying and claiming is, like, if you gaze on Jesus, if you gaze at him, like, get caught in his gaze, like, look in his eyes, like, which I'm still figuring out what that looks like, because you can't just actually look at, he's not a person in a room, right? So he's like, he is a person in a room, but it's not like a person. So, but when you look at him, you will, like, fall in love, and the more that you look at him, the more in love you'll be. And then I just remembered something. One of the guys at the church that had a big influence on me at a point when I was dating Shauna, he gave me really good advice. I asked him about faithfulness to, like, his wife and stuff like that, and how that is in, like, the later years and all this type of stuff. And he told me he's found something. He's found that the more that he looks at his wife, the more beautiful she becomes, and, like, and the less he wants to look at other people. And I was like, that's really sick. Yeah. And so his encouragement to me was, like, make a lot of space to, like, look at God, or to look at Shauna. He literally said, like, make time where you literally just look at her and, like, look at her beauty, you know, and just get lost in it. He's like, it's gonna change things. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's literally the same thing. Like, that is exactly the same. Like, this is just a truth that this guy found in his marriage, and it's just, like, completely, you can put that up there. Like, that is, like, so accurate. So that's so sick. Yeah, but yeah, man, that's really cool. But dude, I also wanted to kind of circle back to the thing about marriage with, like, dying to yourself and the life in that I found. Before I do that, I guess, like, now, after I said, like, I kind of am in this journey of, like, needing to, like, I left that church and I came back here and everything. I'm figuring out life in a big way right now. Like, I'm, like, seeing God in this area has been newer and challenging, and it feels really hard for me. And, like, I think I kind of doubt that I'm gonna see, like, there was somebody spoke something over me at one point. They said, like, your best days are your later days, and I was like, okay, that sounds awesome. But now I'm, like, a little bit, like, it's gonna be a little bit hard to top what was done in the early days, and, like, I'm kind of doubting it. But yeah, like, I think God is definitely still showing himself to me, like, and I've seen him in more, like, in a lot of practical ways. Like, he gives me parking in front of my building sometime when I ask him, in ways that are very obvious. He the princess parking thing, everyone always says it. But he has done so many things to just, like, pour out his love on me so clearly. Like, the apartment that I got, the way that I got it was so clearly him, and we're paying below what we should be paying for it, and, like, I didn't even find it. I spent, like, months on Zillow, and, like, then the place that I actually found, like, just came by, like, a random occurrence, and it was, like, very clearly God. Like, he's taken care of me in my job so many times. At one point I was really struggling with this one project I was on at work, and I just told God, like, then I, like, dropped off that project, and I was like, God, like, that was so hard, and I felt so stupid. Like, can you please just make it so I don't feel dumb for my next job, or for my next project? And then the next project I get on was, like, a perfect match, and I felt like I was and I was like, God, thank you so much. Like, it was so cool. He showed himself to me in so many different ways, like, practical ways, day in, day out, you know, like, and I think I'm just, learning to have a relationship with him in the ordinary, but also believing he can do spectacular things. Here is kind of where I'm at and everything. And the building good habit to people to actually experience how good his love is and everything. So, but yeah, with being married now, it's been really cool getting to see some things that I'd not seen before. Dave talked about this in one of his sermons where he said when Jesus went to the cross and died, his death brought life for everyone. So denying yourself, dying, somehow brings life. And I've seen that nowhere clearer than in my relationship with Shauna, because what I found is there's a lot of times where we're both upset with each other, right? And don't get me wrong, like, we have incredible times. Like, I love this girl. She is hilarious. We laugh so much, like, so much more than we're upset. Like, we have so much fun. I love our marriage. Like, it's beautiful. And, like, she's like she's a complete ray of joy. It's incredible. But she and I will get into fights, right? So we will. And there's times where we're both just at this place where we're like, you completely offended me. And I'm not going to go low. I'm not apologizing first. Like, you have to come to me and ask for my forgiveness, or I'm not speaking to you, type of deal. It doesn't usually go on that long or anything, but, like, we're in it, and we're both just, like, completely sitting there, and, like, you know what brings two people back together in that moment is killing your pride and humbling yourself, and it's the hardest thing to do. Like, literally saying, I don't need to be right. Like, I'm going to say, I'm sorry. Even if I don't fully think it was my fault, I hurt her. So I'm going to choose to go low and to humble myself. And it's so hard, and I don't do it enough, and I'm trying to work on it more. And so is she. But, like, I just found it's crazy, because I'm, like, sitting there, and I'm, like, in this fight, and I'll be like, I know the way to bring us together. I need to let myself die. I need to experience it, feel it, and then I'm going to receive, like, the sweetest hug after, and a really big kiss, and I actually know it was mostly my fault. Like, you know, and because she always does that. I'm like, what the heck? Like, and it's not always mostly her fault.
No.
She'll always say it. She's so thankful that I went, oh, like, humble myself. And, like, and I feel the same way to her when she does the same. And I think it's just, like, crazy, because, like, I've been just seeing, like, oh, whoa, when I go in Jesus' ways, when I deny myself to be like him, and humbling myself, like, literally life comes out of that death, which is just, like, so crazy. And it's like, if you want to have life in this life, like, very practically, like, you need to, like, deny yourself and, like, die in many ways, like, pick up your cross daily. I think it looks like a lot of stuff like that. Sometimes it'll be bigger stuff, but, like, I think it's a lot of ordinary things like that too. So that's been, like, so cool to see, and yeah, like, just really, really beautiful. Yeah, I think that's kind of the full thought right there. But
I love the connection you made with marriage and a relationship with God. Just because I think that's a really, like, real way for people who are either new to the faith or aren't in the faith at all, but may have a relationship with a partner or are married.
yeah,
It's you using that picture of, if you want a good marriage or a good relationship with a person, you have to give a lot, and that you have to give a lot of love, and that love will be reciprocated.
yeah.
And by you showing that in, like, a really real way, how that's how you need to treat a relationship with God, I feel like would be really helpful for people.
Yeah, and dude, I agree with you. And, like, something like, and I think Reality has talked a lot about this, so I've gained a lot of wisdom from, like, they had a series that they did, like, a few years back on, like, marriage and like, about marriage and sex, and it was, like, really good sermon, like, just incredible for pointing us towards, like, what does, like, sex actually mean? What is it supposed to point to? Like, it's like, oh, it literally points to God, like, and the beauty of relationship with him and stuff. But I think the point that you were talking about, something really significant is us being the bride in that case.
Yeah.
Because you literally, like, you look at how, like, love is meant to be, and it's literally the one who gives first is supposed to be the man. Like, that is the person who gets down on the knee and proposes, and, like, who initiates love. And, like, that's the crazy thing is, like, our job as the bride really is to receive love first, and like which is so crazy. Like that's one of the, he's like commanding us to he's commanding us to receive his love that'll make us whole. Like it's like like commands are invitations. Like they're commands because if you don't choose them, like you're going to like experience great loss and it's going to hurt you deeply, and like but behind every command there's a beautiful invitation, and so I think like just seeing the way that he's chosen to make that what it is just incredible. And like I think, and it's really just, it really is so cool. I said this earlier, but like marriage being what God chose to like reflect our relationship was incredible. Like the amount of knowing, the amount of vulnerability, the amount of like showing up and expressing yourself and like acceptance of like the deepest parts of yourself at that level, like it's the greatest intimacy. So it's like by God saying he wants, like this was actually one of the things that changed my relationship with God most, was when I realized like I said, Reality had this series, and they said like Jesus doesn't just want to know you, Jesus wants to marry you. And like when they said that, it changed everything for me, because like I said, relationship was like my greatest thing, right? Like I loved it. Like I was like, that's what I want, that's like what I'm after. And when I saw that, I was like, wait, what I've actually been after is you. This whole time I've been seeking, and all the girls that I was like seeking a relationship with, I've actually been seeking you. Like and there's this incredible quote where I don't remember who this quote is from, but it's like, every man who's knocked on the door of a brothel is searching for God. Like, and it's just like incredible, because it's like that is actually like the deep longing of our hearts, to be like fully known, fully loved in that space. And like the greatest intimacy that like we ever see in like all human existence, marriage, where two people love each other and accept each other at their deepest and experience like this great pleasure, is literally God is saying that is like a poor reflection of like of what it can be with me, which is like, it's so hard to grasp because we're not always going to feel that, but like but we're looking to a day, like we're going to have many moments of that in this life, many, and then we're going to, in the final day, like receive that. And like because there's actually going to become a point where we all die, right? Like we're all going to pass at some point. That hit me. That was a pretty big part of my testimony as well. Shauna told me at a point, like, you need to stop talking about death so much. But it was really funny because I thought about it a lot. I think there was some positives to that, some negatives to that, but I think I thought about it sometimes in the lens where it was like, oh, like I thought that escaping this world was better. Like not like suicide, but like thinking of like, oh, longing for when we come back with God, and how much better it'll be. And so I think like I thought about it in some ways like that, not realizing the truth of God actually wants us to restore this world. Like he wants us to bring the kingdom of God here, like kingdom of heaven here and now. I've learned that since, and it's like I'm trying to figure out what that looks like for my life. But yeah, I think just the reality that we are, like, this life is actually going to pass away. And like that dawned on me a lot. Like, just to live as Christ, to die as gain. I remember over COVID, I sat with that passage and just thought about it. Like, that is massive. Like, to live as Christ, to die as gain. Like, if you actually believe that, and I many times don't believe it, man. Like, if you actually believe that to die is gain, that when you die, you're going to go and be with God and receive all glory, the most like intense, beautiful experience you've ever experienced, that'll completely satisfy you, and you'll never feel longing again, and everything will be made whole, like every longing you've ever had in a moment fulfilled. If you actually believe that, if we genuinely believe that, we would spend every moment of our life like fully after the things of God, fully after like trying to bring everybody in, fully trying to like just make sure that we do not step a foot near sin, not wanting to be anywhere away from him. But I think like we have a lack of faith a lot of time in that, and we don't believe that. And like, and I realize that about myself, and I hope that, and I want to ask God, like, hopefully I'm asking God right now by saying this, but I want to be able to be someone who like fully experiences and believes that that is actually true, so that we actually leave it all behind. Because then to live as Christ means to take up your cross, to come as somebody like, to, like Christ says that he came to serve, not to, like he came to serve, not to be served. And he came and he washed feet, and he came and he stripped himself of his glory, and he was humbled, and he was lowly, right? Like, he did things that no one else would do, and he was the best and like became the worst. Like all these things where it's like, that's what we're actually called to live like, and it's like, and then in that we're gonna find great life. Like Jesus like literally said, like, doing the will of my Father is like what gives me, like, what sustains me. And doing the will of the Father a lot of time look like some really not so fun things, right? Like, and it was like, but somehow he was so deeply satisfied by it. Like our church talks a lot about, right? Like how, like, Jesus was actually, like, a really important belief is that Jesus was actually the most complete, fulfilled human to ever live on the face of the earth. Like, which I haven't thought about much, but like, when you think about that, it's like, dang, like, if that's true, then I need to follow his ways. So, yeah, I think I am trying to learn a lot of this stuff, and God has showed me so much, especially in those early days, and I feel like in these, like, it's not, I've not been around this that long, but like, you know, for me, early days and later days, it's like a 5-year span or so. And with that, like, he's shown me more and more just the necessity of going after him, experiencing him, continually believing that he is worth it, denying ourselves for the sake of like loving and knowing him, and in that we will receive life. So yeah, trying to figure all that out, and it has been a joy. Like the best moments of my life have been the moments where I've got to experience God's presence, and I know that in the end that's what's going to be the whole thing. It's like that.
Yeah.
On tap.
Yeah, right? That's so crazy.
Yeah.
Man, I just want to say, like, before we close out, like, I remember at some point in this testimony, I think it was when you were talking about, like, starting your journey with Shauna, and you were talking about how you didn't feel like you were spiritually mature enough. And I can just tell you, like, from sitting in this chair, and I think Matt probably feels the same way, like, your spiritual maturity is so, like, looking at it, I'm like, I aspire to get to that point where I am able to understand God the way that you understand God. And so I'm very, like, I just want to encourage you, like, you're, from that moment to now, like, I'm sure you were spiritually mature, and I think it, like, might have just been like a self-image thing, but I think, like, I'm telling you, like, it's so beautiful to see, like, your maturity and, like, loving as a brother. I want to say your maturity in the spirit and just in the things of God is so impressive, and I feel like you should just, like, I just want you to know that you're, like, doing it, and you're, like, on the right path. And, like, I am very, like, this has really, really touched my soul. And, like, there's so many parts of this testament. Like, honestly, I don't even care about the audience. Like, I forget you guys. Like, I'm not gonna lie. Like, I don't. This episode was for me. Like, I'm so.
I think that does.
Yeah, right. Okay. I'm getting canceled. All right. Like,
just kidding.
No, but, like, I just, like. Yeah, like, your spiritual maturity is very impressive, and I aspire to that. So, thank you.
Dude, thank you, man. That means a lot.
Well, Luke, if there's anything that you could say to the audience, everyone who's listening, like, one message, what would you say to the people watching?
I would say don't ignore the deep longing of your soul, because it can actually be satisfied. And I was really graced by God to, as like an 18-year-old in college as a freshman, to see through a lot of to see through the temporariness and futility of a lot of things, and just see how I couldn't actually have anything. And I desired so deeply to have something that would satisfy me and never leave me. And never stop. And so I think what I just have to say is go after it, because that longing, there's a person who's actually longing to fill that. Like their desire to fill that is deeper and so much stronger than your desire that you feel to have it filled. And I'm learning to believe that about God. I'm sure you're probably doubting that right now in a lot of ways too, because I deeply doubt that most days, but then we see how true it is when we experience him. And so I think what I would say is the person who you're, like, the relationship that you're longing for, there's a person who is longing for that relationship for you far deeper. And if you will just go to them, if you will go to him, he will completely sweep you off your feet and you'll fall in love.